All right, today we're going to dive into a big one. We're looking at a system that's designed to help groups, especially those groups trying to build a better, more regenerative world, actually work together without falling apart. We're talking about a whole different way to govern, a way to turn all those amazing intentions into real, tangible action. It's a huge paradox, right? You get a bunch of smart, dedicated people together. Maybe it's an eco-village, a co-op, or some nonprofit, and they are all fired up about the same mission. But then, the moment it's time to make a decision, everything just grinds to a halt. All that amazing passion gets totally bogged down in meetings that go nowhere and conflicts that never get resolved. So what is going on here? Well, a lot of the time, the problem lies in the tools we're using. On one side, you've got good old majority rule. Sure, it's fast, but it automatically creates winners and losers. The 51% get their way, and the other 49% are left feeling resentful and ignored. Then on the other side, you've got full consensus. Sounds amazing, right? But in practice, it can be painfully slow, and it means any one person can stop an entire group in its tracks. It's a recipe for paralysis. And for a lot of intentional communities, neither of these really works. So what if there was another way? A system that's designed to be both inclusive and effective? Well, this is where sociocracy comes in. Sometimes it's called dynamic governance, and it's a completely different way of looking at power, structure, and how we make decisions together. So what is it exactly? Well, at its core, sociocracy organizes work into these interconnected teams called circles. But here's the absolute game changer. Decisions aren't made by some boss at the top, and they aren't made by a simple vote either. Instead, they use a process called consent, which is all about hearing and integrating every single voice in the room. I love this quote from a farm cooperative. It really nails it. The point isn't to replace democracy, but to evolve it, to give it an upgrade, really, to make it more thoughtful and way more effective for the kinds of challenges we face when we're trying to work collaboratively. And you should know, this is not some brand new, untested idea. The term itself was actually coined way back in the 19th century, but the modern version we see today was developed in the 1970s by a Dutch engineer named Gerard Endenberg. He was inspired by cybernetics, which is basically the science of how systems regulate themselves, kind of like a thermostat for a group. And he applied these ideas to his family business. Now today, it's a really robust system used by hundreds of organizations all over the world, especially in the intentional community and co-op movements. Okay, so that's the big idea and the history. But what does it look like in practice? How does it actually function on the ground, in a real meeting? Let's get into the nuts and bolts. All right, the absolute cornerstone of sociocracy, and if you remember one thing, make it this, is the idea of consent. And this is totally, fundamentally different from consensus. See, consensus asks, do we all agree? Do we all love this idea? But consent asks a much more practical question. It asks, is this proposal good enough for now and safe enough to try? An objection can't just be, I don't like it. It has to be a reasoned argument for why the proposal would actually harm the group's goals. This one little shift is huge. It prevents paralysis and actually encourages creative experimentation. This whole system is structured around these things called circles. The best way to think about them is like different organs in a body. Power is decentralized, and each circle has its own clear area of authority, its domain. What this means is that the people who know the most about a topic are the ones who get to make decisions about it, and they don't have to get permission from the whole organization for every little thing. And to make these circles really work, sociocracy has this really clever toolkit. One of the coolest parts is something called double linking. Instead of just one manager reporting up the chain, each circle sends two people, a leader and a delegate, to the next circle up. It's genius, because it forces information to flow both ways, up and down, which prevents those information silos that plague so many groups. On top of that, roles are filled by consent, not a popularity contest. And get this, every single decision has a built-in review date, so the group is constantly learning and adapting. So that's the theory. It sounds great on paper, right? But does this social technology actually hold up in the messy reality of human communities? Let's take a look at how it's being used out in the wild, especially in those communities trying to build a regenerative future. Man, this quote from a resident of an eco-village in Spain, it just gets right to the heart of it. Sociocracy isn't just a different way to run meetings. When a group really commits to it, it becomes a cultural practice. It actually changes how people think about power, how they talk to each other, how they share responsibility. It literally reshapes the rhythm of their life together. And you can totally see why this is so critical in a place like a co-housing community. I mean, you're not just coworkers, you're neighbors. You're sharing land, you're sharing resources, you're sharing your daily lives. The stakes are so much higher. You absolutely need a system that can handle tough decisions while still building trust and connection.
So let's look at two really interesting examples. Over at Arterra Bizimodu in Spain, they use sociocratic circles for pretty much everything. And for them, it's a form of what they call socio-political resistance, a way to actively practice a more interconnected worldview. Then you have Collective Spaces Farm in Virginia. They use circles in a really practical way to make sure that people with the hands-on expertise, say in restoring the land, have the strongest voice in those decisions. It just shows how flexible this system can be.
And here's a fantastic, concrete example of consent in action. The farm needed a new tractor, which was a huge financial decision. So instead of a simple yes or no vote, they worked together to craft a proposal. They actually balanced things out. Some members would pay higher dues, while others would have lower work requirements. They kept tweaking it, integrating everyone's needs, until they had a solution that was safe enough for the whole community to try. And the key thing is, nobody was just ignored or overruled. Okay, so I know this might be sounding a little too good to be true, and it's smart to be a bit skeptical. No system is a magic wand, so let's get real about the challenges that come with implementing sociocracy, because it's really important to go in with your eyes wide open. So what are the real hurdles? Well, first off, there's a steep learning curve. It means unlearning all our old ingrained habits about meetings and power, and that can take a lot of time and training. Which leads to the next one. The time investment can be huge, and that can lead to serious burnout if it's not managed well. There's also this subtle risk of creating what some call a soft technocracy, where the people who are just naturally more comfortable with structured dialogue end up having more influence. And finally, it really works best when a group has super clear, shared goals. A vague aim like let's live together better can make it really hard to get to a concrete decision. But here's the thing. Even with all those challenges, the payoff can be massive. A study by the group Sociocracy for All found that organizations saw, on average, a 79% improvement in perceived job satisfaction after they made the switch. I mean, think about that. When people feel like their voice actually matters and that the process is fair, their morale and their engagement just skyrocket. So, at the end of the day, it really comes down to this. There's no such thing as a perfect system for making decisions. The best process is the one your members actually trust and believe in. And, just as importantly, it has to be a process that you're willing to revisit and tweak and refine over time as your community evolves. That flexibility is everything. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. The way we organize ourselves, the way we talk to each other and make decisions in our small groups, that's like a practice run for the kind of world we want to create on a much larger scale. It's a rehearsal. So if our governance really does shape our world, then what kind of world are we building, one meeting at a time?